Aristotle, Life and Legacy in Ancient Greece. Aristotle's life and historical background. In the golden age of ancient Greece, a time when intellect and civilization flourished, a genius was born. Born in 384 BC in a small city called Stagira in the Kingdom of Macedonia, Aristotle was a man of intellectual curiosity and insight that surpassed his time. His father, Nicomachus, was a famous physician and royal physician of the time and instilled in the young Aristotle the spirit of scientific observation and inquiry. Aristotle's childhood was filled with a deep interest in learning and a thirst for knowledge. From an early age, he showed an incredible curiosity about nature and life and developed the ability to observe and analyze his surroundings in detail. At the age of 17, he entered Plato's academy, where he had the opportunity to study in the best intellectual environment of the time. Plato's academy had a decisive influence on Aristotle's intellectual growth. As a disciple of Plato, he conducted deep research in various fields such as philosophy, science, and logic. However, at the same time, he had a critical mind about his teacher's theories and later laid the foundation for his own unique philosophical system. At that time was very turbulent. The aftermath of the Peloponnesian War, the conflicts between city-states, and the rise of the Macedonian kingdom, as well as the complex political environment, had a profound influence on the formation of Aristotle's political philosophy. He did not simply stop at theoretical philosophy, but tried to deeply analyze and understand real politics and society. In particular, his relationship with King Philip II of Macedon and Alexander the Great was a major turning point in Aristotle's life. As personal tutor to Alexander the Great, he imparted to the king a wide range of insights into politics, philosophy, and culture. These experiences had a decisive influence on the formation of his political philosophy and educational theory. To Athens, he founded a school called Lyceum and conducted research and lectures in various fields. His academic approach was revolutionary for its time. His methodology of systematizing knowledge through actual observation and experience rather than abstract thinking had a profound influence on later academic developments. Aristotle's birth and early life. Born in 384 BC in Stagira, a small city in ancient Greece, Aristotle was the son of a physician and showed early signs of intelligence that was beyond his time. His father, Nicomachus, was the court physician of King Amyntas of Macedonia and had a high social status and academic reputation at the time. This family environment provided the foundation for young Aristotle to have a deep interest in learning and knowledge from an early age. His childhood, he had outstanding intellectual curiosity and observation skills and showed a tendency to constantly ask questions and explore nature and life. While learning basic knowledge of anatomy and medicine from his father, who was a doctor, he developed a spirit of inquiry to understand nature systematically and logically. This early education had a decisive influence on his later groundbreaking research in biology and natural science. At the age of 17, he entered Plato's academy in Athens and began to study philosophy and academia in earnest under Plato, the greatest intellectual of his time. As Plato's disciple, he initially followed his teacher's ideas faithfully, but gradually developed his own way of thinking. He had a critical view of Plato's philosophy of ideas and placed greater value on the pursuit of knowledge through experience and observation. Plato's academy, Aristotle developed his own unique ideas in a variety of academic fields, including logic, ethics, politics, and metaphysics. His intellectual journey was not simply an academic pursuit, but a groundbreaking approach to the fundamental way we understand humans and the world. Of his life, laid the foundation for his profound influence on later generations. His medical background, his education at the Platonic Academy, and his ceaseless spirit of observation and inquiry made him one of the greatest thinkers in the history of Western philosophy. Aristotle's early life was not simply a personal history, but a narrative that opened an important chapter in the history of human intelligence. Relationship with Plato. The academic climate of Athens was the place where the greatest intellectual exchange of the time took place. When young Aristotle entered Plato's academy, his intellectual journey experienced a fundamental change. During his 20-year stay at Plato's school, he learned deeply from his teacher's ideas, while gradually developing his own unique philosophical thinking. Plato was more than just a teacher to Aristotle. He played a crucial role in stimulating the intellectual curiosity of the young Aristotle and in developing his critical thinking. Plato's theory of ideas had a profound influence on Aristotle, but at the same time he gradually began to take a critical stance toward his teacher's ideas. This became the seed of his original philosophical thinking. Aristotle raised fundamental questions about Plato's theory of ideas, especially metaphysical concepts. He believed that knowledge could be acquired through actual experience and observation rather than the world of ideas. This difference in perception became an important turning point for him to gradually build his own philosophical system. Unlike Plato's theory of universals, Aristotle was more interested in concrete individuals and considered the pursuit of knowledge through empirical observation important. The two philosophers went beyond that of a simple teacher and student. Aristotle respected Plato's ideas, but at the same time critically reinterpreted and expanded them. His intellectual independence was gradually formed in Plato's academy, which later became the foundation for his establishment of the Lyceum. With Plato was a decisive turning point in Aristotle's intellectual growth. Rather than blindly following his teacher's ideas, he developed his own unique philosophical system through critical thinking. This intellectual journey became the starting point of a revolutionary thinking that brought about a fundamental change in the history of Western philosophy. Aristotle's intellectual independence is not a mere counter-argument, but a valuable example of the essential process of academic inquiry. He respected Plato's ideas while at the same time presenting a new philosophical paradigm that went beyond them. This intellectual courage and spirit of inquiry still serve as a model for academic research today. Aristotle's political background. The political landscape of ancient Greece had a profound and fundamental influence on the formation of Aristotle's thought. His era was a time when the city-states, polis, were undergoing complex political upheavals. City-states like Athens were at the center of constant political conflict and social change, which provided a crucial foundation for his philosophical thinking. In particular, Macedonia, where Aristotle grew up, was a kingdom that was rapidly rising politically at the time. His father served as physician to the Macedonian royal family, which gave him a unique opportunity to observe the inner workings of politics and power from an early age. Growing up in the court of Philip II, Aristotle was able to experience firsthand the dynamics of political power. Plato's academy. He deeply observed the strengths and weaknesses of the democracy and political system of Athens at that time. The trial and execution of Socrates led him to ask fundamental questions about the nature of political systems and laws. These experiences became the core foundation of his political philosophy and led to his deep reflections on how human society should be governed. The Macedonian king Alexander the Great also had a significant influence on his political thinking. As Alexander's teacher, Aristotle was able to observe closely how political power actually worked, how empires expanded, and how cultures merged. This gave his political philosophy a practical and realistic dimension. His political background was not merely an external environment, but formed the core mechanism of his philosophical thinking. His observations on the complex political dynamics of city-states, various systems of government, and deep reflections on the nature of power were vividly reflected in his political philosophy writings. His works, such as Politics, were the product of this direct political experience. Aristotle viewed politics not as a mere struggle for power, but as an important area for the ultimate happiness and prosperity of human communities. His political background led him to explore the essential mechanisms of human society, which developed into his original political philosophy. His ideas were the result of his efforts to deeply understand actual political reality beyond mere theory. Aristotle's philosophical methodology. The journey of human knowledge begins with endless curiosity and deep observation. Aristotle was the greatest thinker who pioneered this path of intellectual inquiry most systematically and innovatively. His philosophical methodology presented an approach that goes beyond simple abstract thinking to closely observing and analyzing the phenomena of the real world. Experience and observation were the most fundamental foundations of Aristotle's knowledge system. He believed that seeing, feeling, and measuring phenomena directly were the core of true knowledge. His meticulous observation and classification of various creatures in nature was a revolutionary approach at the time. By recording the anatomical features, behavioral patterns, and ecological characteristics of animals in detail, he demonstrated the importance of empirical knowledge. Logic was another key element of Aristotle's philosophical methodology. He developed a systematic method of reasoning, establishing a logical structure for knowledge. His logical approaches, such as the syllogism, became the foundation of Western thought for hundreds of years to come. He argued that any conclusion must be reached through a clear and rigorous logical process. Metaphysical inquiry. While exploring the fundamental principles of existence, he did not stop at abstract speculation but tried to connect them with concrete reality. His philosophy that all existence has its own essence and purpose brought metaphysics into a more practical and realistic realm. Human knowledge grows from constant questioning and exploration. Aristotle expanded the scope of learning to include ethics, politics, natural science, psychology, and other fields. In each field, he approached it in a systematic and logical manner, expanding the boundaries of knowledge. His methodology went beyond a simple theoretical approach and pursued practical wisdom. His philosophical approach, which sought the integration of knowledge and practice and the harmony of theory and practice, still provides deep insight today. Aristotle's methodology is not simply a historical legacy, but a guide to intellectual inquiry that is still valid in our ever-changing modern society. Experience and observation. Human knowledge is acquired not simply through abstract thinking, but through direct observation and experience of the real world. Aristotle brought about a revolutionary turning point in the philosophical thinking of his time through this epistemological approach. In his view, true knowledge begins with sensory experience and systematic observation. Aristotle demonstrated a remarkable ability to deeply observe and classify natural phenomena. He systematized his knowledge based on his own observations in various fields such as biology, zoology, and botany. From sea creatures to land animals, his observations were incredibly detailed and accurate. This approach was considered a very innovative methodology among philosophers of the time. Empirical observation is a central part of Aristotle's epistemology. He argued that knowledge is not derived from mere inference or a priori concepts, but rather from direct interaction with the real world. This was a fundamentally different approach from his teacher Plato's theory of ideas. While Plato emphasized the world of perfect ideas, Aristotle placed greater value on concrete and real reality. His observational method was not limited to simple techniques, but was characterized by a systematic and analytical approach. For example, when observing living things, he did not simply look at their appearance, but comprehensively analyze their anatomical structure, behavioral patterns, and habitats. This method can be said to be a pioneering form of the inductive research method that is the foundation of modern science. Aristotle's philosophy of experience and observation went beyond a simple epistemological approach and influenced various academic fields such as ethics, politics, and psychology. He emphasized that in order to understand human behavior, we must observe and understand it in the context of real life. This well shows his philosophical attitude that values concrete experience over abstract theories. In conclusion, Aristotle's approach to experience and observation brought about a tremendous innovation in the intellectual paradigm of the time. His methodology opened the way to empirical and systematic knowledge exploration beyond simple philosophical speculation, and it can be evaluated that this laid an important foundation for the foundation of modern science. Logic and deductive reasoning. The importance of logical thinking in human intellectual exploration is more important than ever. Aristotle's logical approach is considered one of the most revolutionary contributions in the history of human intelligence. He presented a method for systematically analyzing and understanding human thinking. Of logic is to structure the process of correct reasoning and thinking. For this purpose, Aristotle developed a special method of reasoning called syllogism. Syllogism is a method of deriving a logically necessary conclusion from two premises, making human thinking clear and systematic. For example, if there are two premises, all men are mortal and Socrates is a man, then you can derive the conclusion, Socrates is mortal. This logical reasoning method was a very innovative way of thinking at the time. Aristotle showed that it could make human thinking more rigorous and scientific. His logic was not just an academic tool, but also played an important role in solving real-life problems. Aristotle's logical approach had a profound influence on various fields such as law, politics, and philosophy. He argued that human thinking should not be arbitrary or emotional, but should be based on rigorous logic and evidence. Deductive reasoning is to derive specific conclusions from general principles.
Plato, Aristotle's teacher. His theory of ideas had a great influence on Aristotle's philosophy. Aristotle criticized Plato's theory and emphasized the importance of the real world.
Plato's philosophical background and the intellectual revolution of ancient Greece. Plato's philosophical background. Ancient Greece was the center of the most important intellectual revolution in the history of human civilization. It was a special time when mythology, philosophy, art, and politics merged in amazing ways. Athens in particular was a center of intellectual inquiry, where various thinkers reflected deeply on the nature of humanity and the meaning of the universe. Socratic philosophers focused on exploring the fundamental principles of nature and the world. Thales of Miletus sought the fundamental cause of the world in water, and Heraclitus presented the philosophical view that everything is constantly changing. The explorations of these early philosophers had a fundamental influence on the formation of Plato's thought. At that time was very turbulent. The Peloponnesian War had deepened the conflict between Greek city-states, and tensions between democracy and oligarchy were increasing. This social chaos provided an important background for Plato to ponder deeply about the ideal state and system of government. Socrates was the most decisive figure in the formation of Plato's thought. He constantly questioned existing customs and common sense, and showed how to pursue truth through dialogue and reflection. Socrates' dialectical dialogue and ethical reflection became the foundation of Plato's philosophical methodology. Ancient Greece placed great importance on individual reason and critical thinking. Various intellectual practices such as rhetoric, dialectics, and philosophical dialogue focused on developing the individual's ability to think. This cultural background provided the foundation for Plato to deeply explore human reason and intellectual growth. Religion and mythology also had a significant influence on Plato's philosophical thinking. The rich mythological tradition of Greece became a source of metaphorical exploration of the fundamental principles of existence and human destiny. Plato combined this mythological imagination with philosophical thinking to create an original philosophical system. Never born in a vacuum, he developed his own unique ideas in the complex intellectual, social, and political context of his time. His philosophy critically inherited past traditions, but at the same time opened up completely new horizons in the history of human thought. Ancient Greece. Ancient Greece is the cradle of Western philosophy, and many great thinkers laid the foundation for human intelligence. In particular, the philosophical tradition from the 6th to 4th centuries BC had a profound influence on later thinkers and played a decisive role in the formation of Plato's thought. The Miletus school played a very important role during this period. Thales was the first philosopher to try to explain natural phenomena from a rational perspective rather than a mythological interpretation. He saw water as the source of all things, which was a revolutionary way of thinking at the time. His insights into mathematics and astronomy laid the foundation for later Greek philosophy. Anaximander, a disciple of Thales, proposed a more abstract concept of the universe. He viewed the origin of all things as an infinite and infinite element called a pairon, which indirectly influenced Plato's theory of ideas. His ideas were an important milestone in the philosophical exploration of the origin of matter. Heraclitus was a philosopher who emphasized the change and flow of all things, and his proposition, phantes rei, everything flows, had a profound philosophical influence on Plato. He understood the world as a process of eternal change and developed dialectical thinking that sought harmony through opposition and contradiction. The Pythagoreans developed a unique school of thought that combined mathematics and philosophy. They viewed numbers as the fundamental principle of the universe, which had a decisive influence on Plato's mathematical and metaphysical thinking. Their insights into harmony, proportion, and balance left a profound mark on Plato's theory of ideas and the Republic. Parmenides provided deep philosophical reflections on the nature and change of existence. He denied change and insisted on eternal and unchanging existence, which provided an important philosophical foundation for the formation of Plato's concept of ideas. His ideas, which emphasized the importance of pure thought beyond sense experience, became a key element of Platonic philosophy. These early philosophers were not just a simple influence on Plato, but also a fundamental intellectual source. Their explorations laid the foundation for Plato to develop deeper and more systematic philosophical thinking, and played a decisive role in forming the intellectual tradition of Western philosophy. The influence of Socrates. In the great intellectual tradition of ancient Greek philosophy, Socrates was more than just a teacher to Plato. His intellectual journey and ideas fundamentally shaped and changed Plato's philosophical worldview. The intellectual legacy of Socrates was deeply engraved in Plato's system of thought and became the foundation of his thought. Socrates presented a unique methodology for seeking truth through dialogue. His dialectical dialogue method was an innovative approach that did not simply convey knowledge, but drew out the truth hidden within the conversation partner. This method deeply permeates all of Plato's dialogues and became the core methodology of his philosophical writings. In particular, Socrates' proposition, "Know thyself," provided Plato with tremendous philosophical inspiration. It went beyond simple self-reflection and led to a deep exploration of human nature and truth. Plato accepted his teacher's ideas and developed a deep philosophical exploration of the human soul, knowledge, and virtue. Socrates' ethical views also had a decisive influence on Plato. His teacher constantly emphasized the importance of virtue and wisdom, which directly influenced Plato's theory of justice and the state. Based on Socrates' ethical insights, Plato designed a model of an ideal state and ruler. Also, Socrates' critical thinking taught Plato intellectual courage and independence. Plato's constant questioning of the customs and common sense of the Athenian society at the time led him to fundamentally re-examine the existing social order and institutions. This became an important foundation for Plato's political philosophy and social critical thinking. Ironically, Socrates' last days, namely the unjust trial and the poisoned cup, became an opportunity for Plato to reflect more deeply on his philosophy. His deep awareness of the corruption and irrationality of society led Plato to ponder intensely about the ideal state and justice. As a result, Socrates had an absolute influence on Plato's intellectual and spiritual formation. His ideas were like seeds in Plato's philosophical journey, and Plato inherited his teacher's spirit and developed it into a more systematic philosophical system. Without Socrates, neither Plato's philosophy nor the great tradition of Western philosophy would have existed. Political situation and Plato's thought. The political situation of ancient Athens had a fundamental and profound influence on Plato's philosophical thinking. Athens was operating under a democratic system at the time, but in reality it was experiencing serious political instability and chaos. The disastrous results of the Peloponnesian War caused the political order of the city-state to collapse rapidly, which caused Plato to feel deeply skeptical. In particular, the trial and execution of Socrates became a decisive political experience for Plato. At that time, the democracy of Athens seemed to be an imperfect system that was easily influenced by public sentiment. The sight of Socrates, who pursued truth and justice, being unfairly tried and executed, made Plato realize the fundamental problems of the political system. This led him to ponder deeply about the nature of true governance. Plato sought a fundamental alternative to resolve the political chaos of his time. He believed that the existing democratic system was controlled by the incompetent and irrational masses. In contrast, he envisioned an ideal state ruled by a ruler with philosophical wisdom, that is, a philosopher king. The model of government presented in his Republic shows his deep reflection on the political chaos of Athens at the time. Political instability led Plato to delve deeper into human nature and social structure. He saw the individual soul as having a structure similar to that of the state, and believed that the inner harmony of the individual would lead to the harmony of society. This view shows his philosophical efforts to provide a fundamental solution amid the political chaos of the time. Moreover, Plato emphasized the inseparable relationship between politics and philosophy. He argued that philosophical wisdom and deep insight were essential to become a true politician. He criticized the politicians of Athens at the time for only pandering to the public's popularity and believed that true governance should be based on reason and justice. As a result, Plato's political philosophy is closely related to his contemporary background. His ideas were not simply theoretical constructs, but were the product of deep reflection on the political reality of his time. It can be said that the chaotic political situation paradoxically provided Plato with a foundation for developing deeper and more innovative ideas. Plato's theory of ideas. The theory of ideas, one of the most fundamental and revolutionary philosophical concepts in the history of human intelligence, is the core philosophy representing Plato's thought. It is a philosophical system that goes beyond simple abstract concepts and raises fundamental questions about the nature of existence and cognition. Through this theory, Plato attempted to explain the fundamental difference between the real world we experience and the world of true essence. Of the idea means the existence of an eternal and perfect form. Plato argued that all the objects and phenomena we experience in our daily lives are actually imperfect shadows of the perfect idea. For example, all the chairs we see are imperfect imitations of the idea of the perfect chairness. This is like the concept of a shadow on a cave wall, and the true reality exists beyond our sensory experience. Of the theory of ideas is very deep and complex. Plato explains that the human soul originally knew the world of ideas, but lost that memory when it was confined to the body. Therefore, he saw true knowledge not as learning from the outside, but as a process of recalling complete knowledge that already exists within the soul. Through this, Plato understood learning as a process of reproducing memory and redefined the essential meaning of education. Of ideas has fundamentally different characteristics from the world of sensory experience. The sensory world is constantly changing and imperfect, but the world of ideas is eternal and perfect. This is an important philosophical perspective that shows that Plato pursued the absoluteness of truth. He believed that the essence of true knowledge and existence lies in an unchanging eternal form, which was an innovative idea that fundamentally changed the paradigm of Greek philosophy at the time. The theory of ideas is not only the core of Plato's philosophy, but also had a huge impact on Western philosophy as a whole. Plato's concept of ideas had a great influence on later philosophers in various philosophical fields, such as metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. Many philosophers, including Aristotle, criticized or reinterpreted this concept, laying an important foundation for the development of Western philosophy. Definition of idea. One of the most central concepts in Plato's philosophical thinking, idea is a revolutionary philosophical perspective that fundamentally changed human epistemology and ontology. Idea is not a simple abstract concept, but rather refers to the perfect and eternal truth archetype that exists beyond the real world we experience. Plato argued that all objects we experience in our daily lives are actually imperfect shadows of the perfect idea that exists beyond. Of an idea is an unchanging eternal truth and a perfect form. For example, all the chairs we see in the world are imperfect imitations of the perfect idea called chair. All physical objects are only insufficient and limited reflections of that idea, and the true essence exists in the realm of pure spirit that cannot be perceived by the senses. This shows how limited human perception is, and at the same time, it means that true reality is beyond our senses. The theory of ideas is the most innovative part of Plato's philosophy, and it raises fundamental questions about human perception and existence. He argues that the world we experience is not the true reality, but only a shadow, and he believes that the ultimate task of the philosopher is to understand and explore the nature of these ideas. This goes beyond a simple epistemological approach and provides deep insight into the ontological and ethical dimensions. A philosophical perspective, idea is a concept that pursues absolute truth that transcends the limits of human intellect. According to Plato, true knowledge is in the world of ideas that can be accessed through pure reason, not through sensory experience. This was an innovative idea that fundamentally changed the epistemology of Greek philosophy at the time and had a great influence on the development of Western philosophy thereafter. Of ideas also has important ethical and aesthetic meanings. The ideas of perfect justice, beauty, and goodness suggest the ultimate values that humans should pursue. Plato emphasized that we must constantly strive to reach these perfect forms, which becomes the fundamental motivation for human intellectual and ethical growth. Ideas in the real world. One of the most fundamental questions in Plato's philosophical thinking is the complex relationship between the real world we experience and the world of ideas. This relationship goes beyond mere theoretical discussion and provides a fundamental understanding of human existence and cognition. Plato viewed the material world we experience every day as an imperfect shadow of true reality. Ideas is a perfect and eternal form, and the material world we experience with our senses is merely an imperfect imitation of that perfect original. For example, the beautiful flower we see is merely an imperfect reflection of the idea of beauty. The flower will eventually wither and die, but beauty itself will exist forever. This perspective, all things and phenomena we experience are nothing more than imperfect imitations of the true essence. In the allegory of the cave, Plato explains this concept more vividly.